So welcome back. Last time we created some base classes, derived classes. We have the game entity base class, base game entity, which just sets up the name and ID of every game object that will be created in our game, as well as game entity, which is going to be an actual visual representation of stuff on the screen, so like Mario, as well as backgrounds. Game entity is going to represent almost anything in the game that is visual. So yeah, fortunately we're missing a few functionalities. As you can see, it gets a little messy if we go back here and we have to call down. It gets a little messy having to call this, and this. There we go. We shouldn't have to really do this because that looks pretty messy, right? You're calling a lot of sprites, blah 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 blah. You'd want something a little easier than that. So how do we do that? Well, we create our own functions like load, update, and draw. But we have one slight problem. What happens if we have different people working on different objects? But we want every one of these objects, we want to ensure that every one of these objects contains a load or a draw or an update, depending on how we feel. Like say somebody created somebody created entity, and we wanted them to do all three of those functionalities. We have to force them to do that, right? Right now they're not doing anything. So how do we force? Well, we use the third class, which is called an interface. So we're going to right click and we're going to go new interface. Interface really isn't any different. You can literally click class and it's the same thing. And we're going to create a interface to enforce that if anything has to be loaded, they will have to implement certain functionality. So we're going to call it I for interface load. And here's our interface. Much like classes, they're internal and public. And we're going to give them a namespace faces. No, okay. So here's our interface. So what an interface does is it defines what functionality a class must have. So what do we want to do when we want to load? We want to load something. So how do we load? Well, first we should do this and steal all the X and A stuff up here. We're going to put it into here. We want to load something, so we're going to create a we're going to make sure that every class that has to be loaded has a function that will handle loading. So it's going to be void, because it's not going to return anything. It's going to call load. What do I double check here because I forget what I call it. I think load content is what I always call it. Yeah, load content. So we're going to call it load content. And it's going to take in a content manager called content manager. So here's the difference. In classes, usually we do something like this and do the implementation of code and stuff. But we don't want to do that in this case. We just want to define the function that has to be implemented. So we're just going to put a semicolon at the end. This currently means that any class that inherits from iLoad must implement this function, and you'll see in a minute. But there's something else that we want to ensure. There has to be a certain field. When you're loading content, you always need an asset name. We can't force fields, but we can force properties. And we're going to have a property that's a string. Asset name is what we're going to call it. and it's going to have a get, and it's going to have a set. Now usually we have the get and set. No, not that. Well, anyways, usually we have the get and set, and we have code in between to return the asset name. Well, we don't have an asset name to return, so we're just going to put semicolons. Pretty cool, eh? So now anything that inherits from iLoad is going to have the property asset name and the method load. This will become clear in a sec. You'll also notice I didn't put access modifiers. That's because these are public by default. You can only have, or sorry, not by default, only public. You can only have public methods and properties and interfaces. So we want our game entity to be able to load. There we go. Now remember last time I said you can only inherit from one class? Base game entity is an abstract class, but an interface is a special kind of class. It doesn't implement any different implement any methods at all or functionality. It just implements signatures. So you can actually inherit multiple interfaces. Oh, sorry, first we have to use it. Interfaces, there we go. So we can inherit from multiple interfaces. Even though we already inherit from the class, we can inherit from iLoad because it's only defining functionality. So let's see what happens when we run this. We get errors. What's our errors? Game entity does not implement interface member load content, nor does it implement interface member asset name. So basically what it's saying is it doesn't implement these two. So we are required now to implement these two. So we have to have a property as a public string asset name. Wait, public override? I don't think we have to do that. No. String asset name, and it requires a get, which is going to return, well, we don't have an asset name in the game, but we do have one in the sprite. So we're going to turn the sprite.asset name. We're going to return that. Say return. And we're going to set that as well. So sprite.asset name equals value. Cool. So that's implemented. We run it again. Yeah, come on. Now it just does not implement the iLoad. So let's implement that one in our methods. So the iLoad has to actually match, or sorry, the load content has to actually match the iLoad signature. But we have to have the modifier, or access modifier, which is public, automatically, no matter what. Load content, and we're going to take a content manager, which we don't have because we didn't import the XNA stuff. There we go. Content manager. Sure. Now with the brackets, we can implement it. So now it's not going to complain anymore. All good, eh? So what do we want to do with our load? Well, we want to load our sprite.texture, or sorry, we want to call the sprite.load content. We're going to pass the content manager. That's simple. Because what's going to happen is if we click on this, it's going to jump into this load content, and it's going to load the sprite texture using the asset name. But now we have the functionality to load. So let's go back to our game one. If we go back down to here, we go back down to load. We no longer have to say this. We can just say Mario.load. So we can take the sprite out. So now Mario will load. Nothing else has changed. This will become a little more clear as to why we do this later. But for now, for now, just trust me. Sorry, a little stuffed up in the nose. We want to create another interface now. We want to create an interface that requires an update. So we're going to say update. It's going to be a public. What's going to be interfaces? And it's just going to have one signature that's going to be void update. And we're going to pass in. Oh, gotta do the full X and A thing. Game time. Game time. Class game time with the variable game time. So that's going to be our iUpdate interface. So we'll close this, save that. Close load as well. Now we're going to inherit, or not inherit, but well, it's kind of like inherit, iUpdate. So if you run this, it will give you an error claiming that, oh crap. You can actually click on this, that will actually also allow you to implement it. Which I think puts it down here. There it is. Whole thing's implemented right for you. It will throw an exception saying not implemented functionality. We don't want to do that. We want our game to actually update. So how are we going to update? Well, let's go down to update. Zoom out here a bit. I'm going to steal all this code out of here and put it into here for now. And I'm going to put a little statement saying that I'm stuck in the French keyboard. Screw you. To do remove later. I'll put that in to remind myself to remove it. And then we're going to go up to the top here and take this rotation Boolean thing. Because as you can see, this creates a lot of errors, and I'm going to create just an extra Boolean in here. It's not going to be really part of it. To do remove later. So we're going to scroll down to the update here, and we can now remove all the let's just kind of select all of it. Whoa, select all, zoom out here, select all this, zoom in, and we're going to want to do Control F to find. We're going to quick replace, and we're going to want to replace Mario with this. And it's going to be in the one I just selected, so replace all. Good, good, good. That's all good. So let's run it. Oh, Mario's not moving anymore. Well, that's easy because we took out all the code from the update. What we want to do now is we want to scroll down to the actual update. And we want to call Mario.update and pass in game time. Cool, eh? So now press that, and there he is, back to normal, doing his usual spinny self thing. Yeah, there he goes. So that's all good. Alright. So our next interface we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do, so let's add a new interface. So we're going to want to have the third most important thing, which is to draw. Or I draw. and it is an interface namespace interfaces. It is public. Oh, yeah, public, and there we go. This is we're gonna want the functionality void draw, and draw is gonna take in I'll import, or if you, damn it, I now have to select the XNA files once again. So we'll select those, copy those into our iDraw, and our iDraw is going to take, our draw function is going to take game time, and sprite batch, There we go. So that's our signature. But we're gonna have other things too, like when you draw something, first of all, you're gonna need to know what you're drawing, right? So we're gonna need a texture. So we're gonna have a texture 2D called texture. And we're gonna have to be able to get it and set it, right? So remember, because this is an interface and there's no implementation in it, we are going to want to put semicolons. No brackets, no code in this whatsoever, just defining signatures. The other thing it's going to need is the position. You're going to be able to, you need to know where you're drawing. So we're going to drive vector2 position, and we're going to have to be able to get and set that. So that's what we have to do to draw. Now there's a little more in draw. You can also implement other things in draw, like be able to have an origin or a scale. Other little things, but the two major ones are the texture and the position. So let's change, or not change, let's add the iDraw. There we go. And once again, it's going to complain if you try to run it. So let's implement these interfaces. The first one is public texture 2D. It's called texture. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to return, yet again, we don't have a texture, but we do have a sprite that contains a texture, right? So we're going to return that texture. And we want to return it. And set, we're going to want to set sprite.texture equals value. So those two, that's implemented. We're going to also want to implement the public vector2 position. The names do have to match. They have to be the same. Get, return, sprite.position. Sprite.position equals value. So we got those two implemented. So if we run this, it's only going to complain about one thing, which is going to be our draw. Yep, does not implement draw. What did I do? There we go. So now let us implement draw. And we'll do that at the bottom. You can put these in any order, but I like to do the load, update, and draw in those orders. So how are we going to draw? Public void the return, so the access modifier, the return type, function name draw. Draw takes in game time, and takes in sprite batch. Sprite batch. So how are we going to draw? Simple as pie. Oop, not that easy. we call it sprite.draw because we're going to draw with a sprite. And we're going to pass in game time and sprite patch. So now this is going to go into the sprites draw functionality. We go to jump to definition. There we go. It's going to draw it like always. The texture, position, and all of that. So you kind of get the idea of how interfaces work. You might not understand why we want to do this. You will in the next episode. But the interfaces force anything that derives from it to contain certain properties and methods for allowing for functionality. What do you got to complain? It does so, you lying son of a... sometimes it does that. The other thing is also, like I said, you can only inherit from one class. You can only derive from one base class. But you can have multiple interfaces telling how a class is going to work. Though there's no functionality in classes, that's how it gets away from it. If you have two different classes, but both classes say have an update function, how does it know what update function to call if you don't ever implement one in the derived class? It won't. It causes problems. And C++ does that. But C# and Java don't allow you to do that because they only allow you to inherit once. And they use interfaces to inherit from multiple other things. So with that all said and done, we no longer have to do Mario.SpriteDraw. We now just have to do draw. And there Mario goes, whee! And he increases and decreases. So that's all fun and dandy, right? Like I said, this will become a little more apparent in the next episode when we are going to talk about an entity manager. And an entity manager will handle all functionality of game, entities, and other entities, stuff like that. One last thing we want to do is we also want to have, I want my sprite class to inherit the functionality if I load. First, let me put the using statements. We want to do load. What? It's not how you spell using. Interfaces. I load. I update, as well as I draw. Boom. The only reason why I'm not getting an error is because I already implement a position, asset name, texture property, as well as the three functions. So that works out well. So with this all said and done, once again, Mario is going to fly to the left. Whee! So folks, hopefully interfaces makes more sense. Thank you for watching. Hopefully if anybody wants to send in any sprites they want to see other than Mario spinning around, if they want to send something else, please do. Please leave a comment or message me, and I'll let you know where to send it to, and then hopefully I can get some other people's sprites into this program. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Bye now.